then we'll start here. If you haven't helped yourself to lunch, just go ahead. We got some falafel. كيف كانت صحتك؟
جدا مزدحم الاجتماعات بس جدا سريع. الواحد بيلحق يتعامل مع الجيت لاج ليجي تاني.
Yeah. Okay, we're live. Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here in person, and for those who are tuning in online, we welcome you to this year's second event here at the Jerusalem Fund with my dear colleague and friend Ahmed Abofoul, who I will introduce shortly, and I'm sure some of you attended the Sharif Basyouni Memorial Lecture that he gave 2 months ago. My name is Jihad Abu Salim. I'm the Executive Director of the Jerusalem Fund for Education and Community Development and its educational program, the Palestine Center, where we're meeting today. And as the ongoing genocide continues to unfold in the Gaza Strip, and as things continue to escalate in the broader region, we are committed here at the Jerusalem Fund and the Palestine Center to offer quality analysis and opinions and input from experts, policymakers, and voices on the ground. And I'm honored to welcome Mr. Ahmed Abofoul, who's Al-Haq International lawyer, to talk about the recent ICJ ruling, which was considered historic by many. The International Court of Justice issued an important ruling regarding the ongoing Israeli aggression in Gaza. The ruling was in response to a case brought by South Africa against Israel, accusing it of committing genocide. And the court's decision included several key points which we will address today. In his lecture here at the Jerusalem Fund, Mr. Abofoul talked about the case for genocide in general before the recent aggression on Gaza started, and placed Zionist and Israeli colonial violence against Palestinians in a context of ongoing aggression that has been unfolding for decades, and made the case for genocide not just concerning the recent aggression that we have been witnessing, but also in light of the many episodes of Israeli and Zionist aggression against the Palestinian people. So today we're going to talk about the ICJ ruling, understand its significance and importance, and also discuss where do we go from here as advocates, as lawyers, as organizers, and as activists, and as people who work in the field of awareness raising on the Palestinian issue, and especially about what's happening in Gaza. Before I begin, I would like to thank the Institute for Middle East Understanding, the IMEU, and especially my colleague and friend Josh Rubner, who's with us here, for always, bringing voices like Ahmed to the United States, and also give credit to Al-Haq, which Ahmed works with, an organization that has been working on documenting human rights violations and advocating for Palestinian rights on the legal front. So I will introduce Ahmed, and I have some questions for him about the ruling and the next steps following it. And this is an opportunity for you to ask questions. If you're tuning in online, whether on YouTube, Facebook, or on Twitter, on X, formerly Twitter, please write your questions or comments, and I will make sure to convey them to Ahmed here. Ahmed Abofoul is an international lawyer and Legal Research and Advocacy Officer at Al-Haq Organization, the oldest and one of the most prominent Palestinian human rights organizations. An international lawyer expert who was born and raised in the Gaza Strip and who endured several of Israel's previous attacks, Mr. Abofoul is uniquely situated to provide expert analysis on the international law aspects of Israel's attack upon and siege of 2.3 million Palestinians, including 1 million children in the Gaza Strip. In addition to his position with Al-Haq Organization, Mr. Abofoul is also a research fellow on legal mobilization at the International Institute of Social Studies, ISS, of Erasmus University, Rotterdam. He was born and raised in Gaza. He's currently based in The Hague, so across the street from the court, and he holds a master's degree, LLM, in public international law, specializing in international criminal law from Leiden University, and holds a Bachelor of Law from Al-Azhar University in Gaza, where I also went to school. Ahmed, welcome. Thanks for being with us today. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for coming to the United States again. Let's start with the ruling. Before we talk about its significance, let's begin with the elephant in the room. A lot of people praised the ruling, but were bothered by the fact that it did not specifically call for a ceasefire. Many considered this a setback. Is it? What does the lack of the call for a ceasefire mean for Palestinians at this stage?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Again, it's always a pleasure to speak at the Palestine Center. Well, it's completely understandable that people are disappointed that the court didn't approve the South African request for suspension of hostilities. It's important to note here that the term ceasefire is a political one. It's not a legal one. The court would never order a ceasefire. If the court would order something, it would be suspension of hostilities, and it depends on the subject matter of the case. So it was expected that the court might not, most probably will not call for suspension of hostilities, but the hope was that the court will order something else to that effect. And the court has the let's say, the ability to modify the request and order something else, or order part of these requests, or order something new that wasn't even asked by South Africa. And unfortunately, the court did not do that. But it's important to note that, again, it was expected. And here, if you allow me, because there has been, I think, a serious attempt by certain actors to downplay the significance of this ruling. So, for example, we have the U.S. ambassador to the UN saying, the Security Council, let's talk about what the court did not order, which is a ceasefire. And I think it's quite astonishing. It's a very disingenuous way of portraying the order, simply because, as I said, it was expected that the court will not order that, and I will explain why. Actually, for several reasons. First, the court cannot order suspension of hostilities or in that manner, because it can't order Hamas anything. Hamas is not part of the proceeding. This is an interstate litigation between Israel and South Africa. And in other situations, similar cases for genocide, the court didn't order suspension of hostilities. So in the Myanmar genocide case, the court ordered an order that is quite similar to this one. So ordered the stop or the prevention of the genocidal acts and listed them. And I will speak a little bit on about that in a few minutes, because in effect, it's impossible to comply with the order without effectively having a ceasefire, and that's the most important point. The same also happened in the Serbia-Bosnia case. Also, the court didn't order suspension of hostilities. The only case where the court ordered suspension of hostilities was Ukraine and Russia, and there is a legal reason for that. The subject matter of that case was different. Ukraine, in brief, took Russia to court because Russia tried to justify its military operation by saying that Ukraine is in violation of its obligations under the Genocide Convention. So it claimed that Ukraine is committing genocide. So Ukraine went to the court to say, Russia started this military operation saying that I'm violating my obligations. Can you please say that I'm not violating my obligations under the Genocide Convention, and therefore order the suspension of military operation. And that's what the court ordered as a part of the provisional measures. So this is the reason why in this particular case the court ordered suspension of hostilities, because it was about the military operation itself, while in this case it's about the ways in which Israel is conducting the military operation. But as I said, the court ordered Israel to first to prevent any acts of genocide and listed them. So specifically, and I will read them, the court ordered Israel to prevent the commission of the acts within the scope of Article 2, so namely killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, and imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. This was the first provisional measure that has been ordered. The second one was that Israel has to ensure with immediate effect that its military does not commit any acts. And why I'm listing them, I just want you to imagine how would Israel comply with this order without stopping the military operation. So in effect, the court has ordered so to say, a ceasefire, and it will be impossible for Israel to implement that without suspending the hostilities, or at least minimizing the scale of the military operation. None of that, of course, happened. The third measure that was ordered, that Israel shall take all measures within its power to prevent and punish the direct and public incitement to commit genocide. This is also something we haven't seen. The court didn't buy into the Israeli argument that the Attorney General said that issued a warning that he will start investigating those who incited for genocide. It didn't happen. The court found that it's insufficient what Israel, or the steps that Israel has taken. It's interestingly, on this particular measure, also the Israeli judge agreed. So the Israeli judge voted in favor of this measure, and I think in all honesty, the Israeli judge, in my view, in a Palestinian context, and his role within the Israeli occupation is very problematic. He has served to justify several of Israel's oppression and violations of international humanitarian law, and the distorted interpretation of IHL that Israel has been, in a way, distributing. But here, we can just expect what was the reason, whether he genuinely believed in that, or perhaps he realized that his own legacy is more important than that of Netanyahu. And I think it's quite notable. There was also another measure that he also didn't vote against, which is the fourth one, that Israel shall take immediate and effective measures to enable the provisions of the urgently needed basic services and humanitarian assistance to address the adverse conditions of life faced by Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, which is a very specific, measure that Israel, as I said, shall take immediate and effective measures. This is also something we haven't seen, and it will be interesting to see how Israel will report after a month to the court. Something that the court will also transmit to South Africa, and South Africa will have to comment on. And I think why I'm listing them, why I'm reading them, and if you allow me, the fifth measure was also that Israel shall take effective measures to prevent the destruction and ensure the preservation of evidence, something also Israel has to show. And I think it will be quite difficult for Israel to show that it actually complied. Since the court ordered this order, Israel has already killed over 1,500 Palestinians. I think the number is even nearing 1,700, so 1,700. So you can imagine how many Palestinians would have been killed by then. It's quite obvious that Israel is actually negotiating on its obligations. So what Israel is saying, if you release this number of hostages, I would allow this number of trucks. It's quite outrageous that the world is allowing this. Israel has a legal obligation and a duty to allow humanitarian aid. It's acting like a rogue state. It's actually negotiating with the basic services that the Palestinians need to survive in order to achieve a political goal. Although, there is no, let's say, legal definition for terrorism, but some of the definitions would say using force to achieve political end. This is exactly what Israel is doing, in my view, using humanitarian aid as leverage for negotiations. But the importance of this order is not only the order itself, it's the effect that the order will have on other aspects of this situation. So, for example, um, we have been hearing several states saying that they don't support this proceeding, especially the US. I think Kirby said that the submission is meritless, counterproductive, and completely without any basis. I think the American government cannot utter these words anymore. It has been settled by a court. A court is saying there is a plausible case for genocide. So I think the order put into such preposterous claim. But also, I think, interestingly, the court did not touch on Israel's claim of self-defense. It did not address this at all. And in my view, it did not do that because it has already done that in 2004 and made it clear that occupying powers cannot invoke self-defense for threats emanating from the territory they occupy. Um, and this is also, I think, put an end to me, at least for all states that are actually entertaining this rhetoric that somehow Israel is acting in self-defense. This is not the case here. And even if we would assume that Israel is acting in self-defense, what Israel is doing in the Gaza Strip now is beyond any acceptable or legal measures. So the order is binding on Israel, but it also invokes responsibility on third states and positive obligations on third states to ensure not only compliance with this ruling, but also to show how they actually met their obligations to prevent genocide. And I think here a particular responsibility is in the U.S. The court has said in the Bosnia case, for example, states who have a particular relationship with one of the parties, especially the party that is committing genocide and has a leverage and can influence the decision of this country, has a particular responsibility to use that influence to stop genocide. Unfortunately, the US is not doing that. As a matter of fact, it's actually contributing to the genocide that is taking place in the Gaza Strip. I conclude with that. In general, I think in such situations, the court order is worth what it will be made of it. So I think it will depend on how this order will be utilized diplomatically. We've seen that Algeria has introduced a resolution or intending to introduce a resolution at the Security Council. It will be interesting to see if the US will veto again. The US has sent a signal that it will veto again. But I think it's of particular importance to see how the US will act, and if it will veto. Obviously, the US does not want to be put in a place where it has to veto again, but we'll see how this will happen. And one final thing, we're already starting to see the effect of this decision. For example, a few minutes before we started this talk, Nicaragua officially submitted to the court its intention to intervene in these proceedings, and most probably the court will approve this. And I think several states should do that. South Africa already taught the whole world a lesson of how they can meet their obligations. I think there's certain responsibility on Arab and Muslim states to do so. I hope soon we will see some of these requests.
Thank you so much for this detailed answer. And before I get to the specific implications of this ruling and questions with regards to enforcement and strategies for activists and organizers and advocates, I would like to, if you could tell us a little bit about the trajectory moving forward at the ICJ and other UN bodies, uh, what are the next steps? And when do you think and how would this case will be resolved? And what will it take to arrive at a final ruling? Will it take years? Will it require sending investigators? And what if Israel does not cooperate?
Yeah, well, in such cases, usually the case will take years, but of course the court has this possibility of issuing provisional measures to ensure no further irreparable harm between the parties, and that's why we have this order. Um, Issues of compliance that will depend on the state in question, that is Israel, but also on the Security Council to enforce that decision. Um, Needless to say, there is an American veto there. There is lots of politics, and I think um, the 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 American administration needs to reach a conclusion that the cost of supporting Israel in this genocide is actually much higher than any gains, if any, for the U.S. I don't know when the U.S. would reach this conclusion. It's important to note that, in my personal view, if there is any state that can stop this, it's the U.S. And I said it before. I think the rest of the world, or global north, or the West, call it what you wish, is actually just following the US in what the US is doing. And unfortunately, the US has a distorted version of reality because it only listens to Israel. Israel has been for the past 75 years pathologically lying. We're not delusional about this as Palestinians. We know it very well because we're the direct subject of Zionist cruelty. Um, but I think if the past months has shown the world something, is what we knew all along, that Israel is lying, that Israel commits crimes and continue to lie about it. So in a way, we're in a watershed moment, or a moment where mask is off. The world is seeing Israel and this underlying ideology, Zionism, for what it is, and it will depend on the mobilization that will happen around the world, not only through the UN institutions, but also grassroots organizations and people who can actually uh, um, um, galvanize on this moment and try to put pressure on governments to change course. Something I wanted to mention, of course, I'm sure you're aware of the UNRWA saga, as I would call it, which was a day after that decision, and I think it was a very cunning way to derail the discussion. And to a certain extent, I think Israel and the US managed to do that. They tried to downplay the significance of this resolution. Israel tried to portray it as somewhat not satisfactory for Palestinians, or that the court did not order ceasefire, therefore it sees any point of Israeli argument. That is not the case. And the attack on UNRWA is not new. Israel has been attacking UNRWA for years. The attack on UNRWA is political one. And in my view, it's an attack on the right to return of Palestinian refugees. Um, um, and I think it was quite shameful how states responded to that. So while the court the day before ordered that there's plausible case for genocide and states have a responsibility to prevent it, none of these states took any action, at least to stop sending arms to Israel. But the moment Israel put in, some news that there is some rule for UNRWA members in the 7th of October attack, they rushed to cut funding. Shortly after, it was proven by several media outlets, including Channel 4 and many others, that there is no evidence whatsoever. And I think it just shows you Western states' behavior in relation to Israel. They're just desperately hoping for anything that Israel can provide to verify its claims or to find any justification for what Israel is doing. And they keep, in my view, embarrassing themselves. It's a huge embarrassment for them. It shows the ugliness of the behavior of these states towards the Palestinians in any place in the world. One of the most important principles in any fair system is presumption of innocence, right? You don't persecute someone or start punishing them without a due process, without an investigation. Somehow these states acted as, for Palestinians, the presumption actually is that of guilt until a Palestinian is proven innocent. And I think it was quite shameful how these states acted. Now that we have clear evidence that Israel did not provide any evidence, its allegations are baseless, these states must restore funding to UNRWA and must stop, continuing exporting arms to Israel. We started several legal proceedings, including in Australia, in the UK. We're supporting other partners who are taking the governments to court, especially in Norway and the Netherlands, for their complicity in genocide and the continuation of providing arms. There is responsibility on these states. And something else I want to mention, these states who contribute directly to the current situation could also be taken to court for the complicity in genocide. And I think only time will tell if other states will be taking other states to the ICJ for this rule. There have been some reporting, I'm not sure if it's verified or not yet, that certain states are thinking of taking the UK, the US, and other states to the ICJ for the complicity in genocide. I think this is an important tool that must be utilized, and I hope we see more of these cases in the future, because if the past years have taught us something, that Israel is not interested in any political solution, and the right path is to provide justice. Only justice can lead to peace, and justice can only be achieved through courts.
Will individual policymakers and politicians be, would it be possible to hold them accountable in their individual capacity after their tenures end for aiding and abetting in genocide during, their roles serving in different positions of power in any of these countries that supported or support Israel's genocide?
Yeah, that would depend on the legal system where the case is being taken, and how it views or interprets the rights of that individual while in office. So this is a matter of immunity, and it will depend where. However, there is no immunity before the International Criminal Court. The International Criminal Court can start doing that. Unfortunately, we don't have any positive sign that this will be taking place, but theoretically speaking, under the rules of the Rome Statute, in particular Article 25, individual criminal responsibility includes aiding and abetting. So certain individuals that aid and abet the commission of international crimes, including genocide, can be held accountable before the International Criminal Court.
Thank you. I have a two-part question. It's somewhat related, and it concerns the question of enforcement. What mechanisms exist or could be envisioned to ensure compliance with the ICJ's orders? I mean, you mentioned that since the ruling, more than 1,500 Palestinians have been killed. The rate is still between 150 and 250 a day. So every day we wake up and the main headline on Al Jazeera is, the number of Palestinians who have been killed in the past 24 hours. So this is still happening. So in terms of enforcement at this stage, or during later stages of the trajectory concerning this order, how can compliance be ensured, and what role can and should the international community play in supporting the enforcement of the ruling, and of course in addressing the broader questions that surround it with regards to Israel's practices and actions?
Yeah, well, it's important to differentiate here between two things. What do we mean by international community? The international organization, so including the UN, the Security Council. This is one way to try to enforce this ruling. Expectedly, if there will be a resolution before the Security Council, the US will veto. There's always the option to go to the General Assembly under United for Peace, although it won't be enforceable because it's not by the Security Council. But this is what the, let's say, international organizations can do. But it's important to know that the prohibition of genocide under customary international law is that of, as we'd call it, yes, koken. So it's a peremptory norm from which no derogation is permitted. And it also invokes erga omnes obligations. So it's owed toward all. So each individual state has a responsibility to ensure let's say, compliance with this order. So states can take measures individually, individual states, to ensure compliance with this. As I mentioned, one of the most important thing is stop sending arms to Israel. This could also include imposing sanctions on Israel, arms embargo on Israel, whether within, the UN umbrella or individual states, freezing assets, complete isolation of Israel, because Israel is in violation of its obligations under the Genocide Convention. So there's so much that states can do. It all depends on political will. And unfortunately, I don't think it has been demonstrated that states are willing to do so. We've seen this from South Africa. We've seen from a number of global South states cutting relations or calling ambassadors, etc. So along the way, I think at a certain point of time, maybe certain states will take further actions. Maybe they will take other states that can actually stop this, like the US, to the ICJ. I cannot read into the future, but what I can say, it depends on how states will utilize this order, how states will use it. I think there is a primary responsibility on the state of Palestine to also ensure that, or advocate for that. There are lots of things that could be done. One of the things that I don't really understand, for example, Palestine, if you remember, a few years ago, had a case against the U.S. After the U.S. relocated its embassy to Jerusalem. This case was before the International Court of Justice, and the case was stopped after a request from the Palestinian Authority to allow negotiations. So, to be honest, in this time where the Palestinians lack any tools, I don't think personally, and I'm speaking now in my personal capacity, not on behalf of Al-Haq, I don't believe that we've seen any American administration that is more hostile towards the Palestinians than the current one. Any American administration that has complete disregard to Palestinian lives and showed no empathy whatsoever. So I think the big question is why the PA is not invoking this case again, why the PA is not taking other cases to court. It's important to know that there is another case that is coming this month. It's an advisory opinion case on the legal consequences of the occupation. I think this is a very important one, although the decision will not be binding on states because it's an advisory opinion, but the decision will be very important to decide the illegality of the Israeli occupation. And I think perhaps at a certain point, all of these efforts will create momentum for states to start changing something, or start changing course and the way they're approaching the situation. But personally, I think there is a particular responsibility on the Palestinian Authority, on Arab and Muslim states. They can make use of these legal paths, and unfortunately, they haven't done so yet.
Thank you for this. Yeah. So we talked about the responsibility of states, UN bodies, and actions that can be taken at the level of what we call the international community. But in terms of grassroots movements around the world that support Palestinian rights, um, what legal, legislative, and grassroots strategies do you recommend for advocates to take on to support the implementation of these measures? And how can this accomplishment be incorporated into our language and discourse and activism moving forward?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, one of the most important things, Jihad, that we as Palestinians, we knew all along that Zionism is genocidal because we're the direct subject of it. And I spoke about this here last time, how settler colonial ideologies are genocidal. There was always resistance by Israel's allies saying, no, Israel is not genocidal. Now I think this discussion is over. The court said there's a plausible cause for genocide. So one of the most important things now, this is not merely an allegation. This can be used by all Palestinians that Israel is genocidal, and there's a responsibility in all states not to assist and to prevent Israel from committing this genocide. Another thing is also another form of utilization of this order is to use other legal systems, especially domestic legal systems. It might not be successful, but it will create, I think, a conversation. It will invoke a conversation that is needed. And here, if you allow me, I will refer to the case that was here in the US, which we started as Al-Haq with Defense for Children International Palestine. The Center for Constitutional Right here in New York was the lawyers where the lawyers took the lead in this case. In addition to plaintiffs from the Gaza Strip and Palestinian Americans from California, and took place in California, Oakland, where I was there last month, where I testified on behalf of Al-Haq, and I testified as an international law expert, but also in my personal capacity because of my own family losses. And it was a historical moment. The judge dismissed the case after the hearing, but it's important to note that he approved the Palestinian plaintiff's request to have a public hearing, and he approved public testimonies by all witnesses and experts. This is the first time in the history of the US that the Palestinians speak for themselves. This is an important step, a record of history where Palestinians were able to narrate their own struggle, were able to testify about what they endured, and the judge allowed it all. The judge rejected all US lawyers' objections. He said, I wanted to hear it all. He started by actually giving context about the situation in Gaza. It was a pleasant surprise that he also allowed all the testimonies. And at the end of the hearing, he said, his exact words were that this is one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult decision he will have to make in his whole career. And although in his decision he dismissed the case based on jurisdictional matters and the political doctrine, the famous separation of power principle that the judiciary cannot tell the executive authority what to do in matters of foreign policy. Although we disagree here with the premise of that, it wasn't about political decisions. It was about legal matter. It was about the U.S.'s obligations under international law and under U.S. law. But the court, the judge dismissed the case and cited the ICJ provisional measures opinion, the order. So the order was cited. He said that the ICJ said there is a plausible cause for genocide. He actually also implored, the Biden administration to do everything in its power to prevent genocide. He mentioned something like, and I invite everyone to read the judgment or even watch the hearing. It's publicly available. I will share the link with you. He basically said that there are certain situations where the court would hope it has the authority to rule in something, but it wasn't accessible to the court in this matter, in this particular situation. So the judge basically was saying he's convinced there is genocide. He wishes he can order the American government, but as a matter of jurisdiction, as a matter of proceeding, he just couldn't. His hands are tied. And I think this is one of the examples on how to capitalize on this order, how to use it on in domestic jurisdictions, whether the U.S. or any other part of the world. And I think there are different legal efforts taking place at the moment, which Al-Haq is also either involved in or assisting. And this is, if I can say through you, an open invitation to any colleagues around the world who are planning to take cases in their domestic jurisdictions. If they need any help, Al-Haq is willing to cooperate and assist anyone in their efforts. This is on the legal path. Perhaps I'm not the best person to answer on the activist part of it. I think other people are more qualified than me on this matter. But I think it's important the language we use, as you said. Now there is no question that Israel is plausibly committing genocide. This has to be part of the Palestinian narrative. Personally speaking, I think it shouldn't only be about the provision measures order. I think it should also touch upon the fact that Zionism is inherently genocidal. This is something that was missing in this proceeding. It was about Israel. It wasn't about the ideology, but I think it's, in my view, a responsibility of the intellectuals around the world, especially Palestinian intellectuals, to situate this within the broader framework. I saw your tweet the other day, and I think that's something Palestinians agree on. Palestinians understand very well, but the rest of the world doesn't. Our problem was never with the Jewish people, not even with the connection to Palestine. It was with an ideology that didn't view Palestinians as equal human beings. And until we were addressing this fundamental issue, Zionism, the ideology, which was deemed by the international community in 1975 as a form of racism and racial discrimination. And I mentioned that last time I was here. This resolution by the United Nations General Assembly was only revoked because Israel conditioned its revocation on coming to the Madrid conference in 1991. So it was a political maneuver to get this resolution away. And as you all know, after that, there was no peace because Israel never implemented the so-called Oslo Accord. So I think this is one of the most important things when we talk about genocide. We have to always stress that Zionism has always been genocidal and will continue to be. And until we address this situation, I'm afraid the situation is not going to get any better.
Thank you so much for these thoughtful answers, Ahmed. I have many more questions for you, but I would like to give the opportunity to our friends here in the audience. And of course, for those tuning in online, please feel free to post your questions as comments on YouTube, Facebook, or on Twitter, now known as X. And yeah, so please raise your hand if you have any questions for Ahmed. My friend Abdurrahman here will pass the mic to you. State your name and question, and please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Helena Carbon. Nice to see you again, Ahmed. And thank you, really, that was very, very helpful. I have a couple of questions. One has to do with the reporting requirement, which I think it was brilliant that the South Africans put that in. And, you know, I am just so in awe at the comprehensive nature of the South African application to the court. And I think they've served the cause really, really well. So what opportunities does this reporting requirement give us? That's one thing. And then about the nature of the makeup of the bench. In The Hague, I think it was important that the ruling was issued while Judge Donoghue was still the president of the bench. But then she went off immediately, right, at the end of January. Will the composition of the bench be substantially changing as far as you know? Since you live next door to it, you might as well tell us.
Yeah, well, the new president is actually the Lebanese judge. But let me just be clear here. The judges at the ICJ, they don't serve their countries. They have professional responsibility. They just put forward their opinions. They judge with professional integrity, and we have to respect that, even if we don't disagree with their opinions. We have the example of the Ugandan judge, for example, where her own country said her position doesn't represent the government. This is another example. But I don't think the composition of the court now is necessarily worse than it was. For example, we have the South African judge and several other judges that I think they're quite qualified. And as a lawyer, it's our professional responsibility. We always have faith in judges. We trust them. We can disagree with them, but we respect their opinions. Even the judge that rejected all the measures, I mean, even more than the Israeli ad hoc judge, she basically rejected everything. Personally, I disagree with what she said. If you read her separate opinion, it was technically saying the situation in Palestine is a political question, therefore it cannot be litigated before a court. And it's quite preposterous to claim that, because the question in genocide is a question under the Genocide Convention, customary international law, and should always be litigated before a court. But in the same time, she's entitled to her opinion. It wasn't, if in a way, it didn't have a great effect on the court ruling. The court was passed, and this is the beauty of litigation and of legal processes. People have different opinions, and they vote, and then we have a decision, as we had in such manner. Also, if you allow me, it was also notable, Judge Nolte, the German judge, it was the one who, in his opinion, said the argument by Israel that because the Jews have suffered genocide in World War II, that they cannot commit genocide is not a convincing one. So it tells you a lot on how judges, sometimes feel the need, although they agree with the ruling, they feel the need to say their opinion about specific matters, whether in relation to incitement, whether in relation to genocidal intent. I think there is a certain value in that legally. So in relation to judges, I don't think it's necessarily bad or worse. I think it's good, and only time will tell. This litigation might take years. On the reporting requirement, personally, I think 1 month was too much. I think the court could have ordered 2 weeks. I think it's a long period, considering the scale and the rapid destruction and the intention by Israel to create conditions to induce people to leave the Gaza Strip. And again, this is not my analysis because I'm so smart. It's because the Israelis are saying this on TV every day. All the people need to do is just listen. So I think the court could have ordered a shorter period. But the fact that the court ordered reporting, it also gives South Africa the opportunity to comment on that reporting. So there will be back and forth. Israel will have to report how it met or how it respected the order. South Africa will show that Israel did not respect the order, because it's, I think, crystal clear that it did not. But during that period, it is possible that other states will intervene, as we saw, for example, Nicaragua intervene. It's possible that South Africa itself, during this period, would object, telling the court that Israel is actually expediting its operation and causing further irreparable harm, and therefore you need to intervene now. So this is a possible scenario. I don't know if this will happen or not. Only time will tell. But what I would say, this is pretty much an alive proceeding, and things can change at any time. But again, I repeat that I think the court could have ordered a shorter period. 1 month in this situation, I think, was too much. Palestinians don't have, but I think Palestinians don't have the luxury of time.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Benjamin Tua. I think you said or implied that the U.S. is very likely to veto a resolution on this issue at the UN Security Council. How likely is it that it could abstain?
Well, what they said, that they will not support. I don't need to speculate on that. They actually said it.
Right.
That they will not support the resolution if Algeria will introduce the resolution. Most probably it will be next week. So only time will tell. I think it will be quite shameful. It will be a disgrace and it will remain a stain on the US in its history. History will not judge the US kindly. History will not judge, I think it will judge Biden in particular harshly. He's complicit in this genocide. Biden, Blinken, and Austin, three of them, they have blood of Palestinian children on their hands. And we, the Palestinians, and I think all human beings should not forget or forgive that.
How about abstention?
Only time will tell, but from what the Americans are saying, it doesn't seem to be the case. And I think it's quite interesting, you know, because Blinken was just in the region yesterday and the day before, and he met with Israeli officials, and he said that they're very concerned about the military operation getting to Rafah. And as you know, Rafah is the city furthest south. It's between Egypt and the Gaza Strip, and people are have been in the past month squeezed in Rafah. It's concentrated with people. It's going to be catastrophic, you know, if Israel continues, militarily in Rafah. And Blinken expressed the U.S. concern in the same day, a few hours after. Gallant said that they will continue the military operation in Rafah, regardless of what others think. Nothing will stop them. And Netanyahu went on TV saying that Israel will continue until, quote unquote, total victory. So technically, and sorry for my slang language, the Israel is telling the US, get lost. They just don't care. And I think it's very telling on how the US is approaching this situation. Israel is not listening. Israel doesn't care. And unless there are consequences on Israel, nothing will change. And I think, if you allow me, just answering on the US relations or the US position, I think what's at stake here is not only, you know, the very existence of the Palestinian people, the credibility of international law, but also the credibility and reputation of the US. Especially in our region. The US cannot claim to be, quote unquote, beacon of democracy and promoting human rights. It's actually complicit in genocide, and this will remain in its history.
If there are no other people in line, can I ask another question? You referred to a judge that said that this was a political issue. Who was that judge?
The Ugandan judge.
Uganda. Oh, okay. All right. And concerning the Israeli judge, he was an ad hoc judge. Did he agree with all the provisions or select just a number of them?
He disagreed with most of the provisions. He only agreed with incitement to genocide and allowing humanitarian aid.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Nader Abid. So after the 30 days, the reporting period, what happens? Okay, so they reported, and then what?
Well, basically, Israel will submit its reporting to the court. The court will transmit this reporting to South Africa. South Africa get a chance to comment on this reporting, and then the court will assess if Israel complied with the order or not, and possibly order something else, depending on that assessment.
Okay.
Joseph Sala, you quoted Kirby on the lack of merit and the lack of fact. Why has he not, or Harris at the State Department, been challenged when they make that assertion as to the basis of that assertion? Because as far as I know, there has not been an opinion issued by the legal advisor at State on this matter. And if pushed, this administration is going to go back to Rwanda of how many acts of genocide are genocide.
How can I answer that diplomatically? You know, well, in all honesty, first of all, I'm sorry that I quoted him, and let me just be honest. This man just keeps making a joke out of himself, like most American officials at the moment. It's quite embarrassing to see them uttering these words. Spokespersons of the American government keep parroting the same thing, never answering the questions. We saw, for example, Saeed and others asking very important questions. They never answer them. They can't answer them. Something else I would say about the legal side of it, I really sympathize with legal advisors working in the American administration and the State Department. I don't think, and they're dear colleagues, I don't think they're advising what the government is doing. I think the government is not listening to its own staff. We've seen a certain movement within the staff in the White House opposing the administration's policy when it comes to Palestine. There've been some even demonstrations in front of the White House. So you see the sense of dissatisfaction from staff and frustration from the government's position exist in so many levels. And again, the answer to that is that there is no basis for this allegation. They're just parroting what the Israelis are saying. And if Kirby or the U.S. administration has a legal opinion to say that genocide is not being committed, what we learned from the U.S. that the U.S. is a democracy and respects the rule of law. Then the U.S. should submit its observation, should intervene in this case, and show us what it has to offer. But keep distributing this political rhetoric, I think, only causes more embarrassment to the U.S. and shows that it's not an honest party in this situation. As a matter of fact, it's co-perpetrating the crimes that are being committed in the Gaza Strip. And all those who try to justify, including Kirby and others, are actually responsible for that, responsible for not only justifying these crimes, but also attempting to rationalize what Israel is doing. They're complicit in it. Yeah, yeah.
Hi, my name is Alex Tarzakan. Thanks so much for your remarks. I'm also an international human rights lawyer, and so I thought you broke everything down really well. I'm curious to hear, in your opinion, what do you think is the significance of the provisional measures and the ruling when it comes to the future of international law, and also the significance of it for the Arab world as well?
No, thank you very much. It's quite flattering that an international lawyer thinks that I actually covered everything, because we tend to disagree with each other a lot. Thank you very much. No, the significance of this proceeding, as I said, is not only about the Palestinian people, it's about the credibility of international law, and whether we can, in a way, save international law from people reaching the conclusion that this is ineffective and losing faith in international law. Because our human experience, if we were to learn anything from history, the experience of destructive two world wars is that without the rule of law, the alternative will be ugly and will be more destruction, and more innocent lives will be lost. I wish to believe that after the two world wars, we agreed, or well, we didn't so much agree, at least a system emerged with certain rules to govern everyone. Unfortunately, and I know where your question is coming from, Western states have not applied international law principally, and they bear the main responsibility for the public's loss of faith in this body of law. In my view, at least since the end of the Cold War until this very moment, the West had the absolute power and authority to apply this law principally on everyone, but they didn't do so. What they did was applying it selectively, only when politically convenient, and it has been very damaging to this body of law. And I think they've done this irresponsibly, because this can have catastrophic effects on all of us as human beings and on the world order as a whole. On the Arab world, I mean, I don't know what to say there, but that unfortunately Arab states don't see in themselves, or at least that's what they have demonstrated, they don't see in themselves as actors in this world. several Arab states could have taken the steps that South Africa has taken. It will remain shameful that none of them did. Also, other Muslim states. I think what happened in the past months with the South African proceedings before the ICJ is showing us that the lived experience of oppression, of facing settler colonialism and the domination by one group over the other, this experience, this shared struggle is much more important than sharing a nationality or an ethnicity with any other group. It's quite shameful that Arab nations did not intervene in this case, did not start this case, and I think until they start utilizing these tools of international law, they will have no importance in that region. And I think it's quite regrettable, because what Israel is doing does not only pose a threat to the Palestinians only, it does pose a threat to other Arab countries. I mean, they're not hiding that, especially with the current fascist governments holding, Netanyahu held a map at the UN, which covers part of other Arab countries. Bezos Smotrich in Paris held a map including Jordan. They're publicly calling from, from the river to the river, from the Nile to the Euphrates, that they want greater Israel in a way, which includes part of Arab countries. So I think it's regrettable that they don't realize that the Palestinians are not fighting for their own dignity and the dignity of the world, but also for Arabs, because they're next, whether they like it or not. That's what the Israelis are telling us every day. They just need to listen to what the Zionists are saying.
Any questions? Please.
Said that there is no proof of collusion, or maybe you used a different word, of specific UN UNRWA employees in the October 7 attack. If that is the case, why did UNRWA fire, I think, 4 or 6?
That's a good question, and I think they were wrong to do that. What they should have done is starting a transparent investigation, and whatever this investigation concludes, they could have acted accordingly. I think what UNRWA tried to do, in good faith, perhaps, is to show Israel and the world that they're taking this seriously. And they made it clear that they're suspending or firing certain staff pending an investigation. And that's what I talked about, that the way they behaved, it's not, the Palestinian doesn't enjoy the presumption of innocence. So they presumed that they're guilty, fired them, and they said then we would investigate. And I think I don't agree with this behavior, even though they did that expecting the reaction of other states, because UNRWA understands very well that this attack is on the very existence of UNRWA. So they tried to do this, in my view, to mitigate the harsh reaction from other states. And I think it failed. Still, you had this reaction despite the lack of evidence. And actually, Blinken admitted this himself when they asked him. He said that he didn't see an evidence, but he considered that from a credible source. That is Israel, that has been pathologically lying in the past months. And now we have, as I mentioned, several reportings, including Channel 4 and I think Financial Times, I can't remember who else, but several media outlets and investigative journalists that got hold of the so-called dossier of evidence and examined it. They all concluded that there is no evidence whatsoever. So this decision was made based on no evidence. I think it was a political attack, and it's shameful on these self-proclaimed democracies to follow mere allegations and take actions based on an unsubstantiated allegations without verifying them.
Thank you so much, Ahmed. And this has been really great. I think ending with this note that this is not just about Palestinians, but it's about the very existence of the post-World War II international order that's being undermined by Israel's actions and crimes and by the cynicism of the international community. When we say the international community, we mean Western countries, but also, the glimmer of hope that there is this push coming from the global South, by countries like South Africa and the other countries that have been supporting Palestinians on a global stage, showing also that that perhaps the United States and its allies and the camp of the US, UK, and other Western countries isn't necessarily that powerful anymore. So probably this is reflective of changes that are taking place on a global scale. And Gaza has, I think this moment will be talked about and will be remembered as one that redefined and reshuffled the agenda for the remainder of the 21st century, in good ways and in bad ways, of course. But with that, I'm really grateful for joining us today and for sharing your input and thoughts. And we'll conclude here. So I know you're tired, jet lagged, probably traveling all over the world, and we're grateful for your efforts. And
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, and shout out to the work you do at the Jerusalem Fund, but also to you personally, Jihad,
shukran.
one of the people that I respect and admire so much. And I said it last time, I repeat it again, another example of what Gaza has to offer. So I'm very happy that I'm here, and thank you very much for having me again. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ahmed. You're so kind, and yes, the world is missing out. That's why we need to end the blockade and hopefully, go to Gaza and see what it has to offer. Just a reminder, next week on February 15th, Thursday, I'm hosting Dr. Akram Al-Ajla, who is from Gaza. He's based in Sweden. And Dr. Akram is a researcher and a professor in historic conservation and cultural heritage. He previously worked for years as a professor at Al-Azhar University in Gaza, and before that at the Ministry of Tourism, and he directed the Department of Archaeology and Cultural Heritage at the different institutions in Palestine. And this will be on Zoom, so you can join from the comfort of your living room or office. And this is going to be an important conversation and related to the one that we had today, because Dr. Akram will talk about the scale of damage and destruction that Israel caused in bombing more than 22 ancient, historic, and cultural heritage sites in Gaza City, including the Great Omari Mosque that has been completely destroyed, the second oldest mosque in Palestine after Al-Aqsa. And he will also talk about how this amounts to a war crime. So hopefully we will continue to make these different cases on concrete and specific levels concerning the different aspects of Israel's genocide in Gaza. So please RSVP. It's going to be a shawarma-less event, but nonetheless, food for the thought. Thank you all so much for joining us. And yeah, thank you, Ahmed.